Sonny Bono, in full. Salvatore Philip Bono, born February 16, 1935, Detroit, Michigan, U.S. died January 5, 1998. South Lake Tahoe, California. American songwriter, producer, entertainer and politician who found fame in the 1960s and 70s as part of the TV and music duo Sonny and Cher. He later became a Republican politician and served in the U.S. House of Representatives 1995–98. Bono was born in Detroit to immigrants from Sicily. The family struggled financially, and when he was 7 years old they moved to Los Angeles. He later dropped out of high school and worked odd jobs, including those of truck driver, construction worker, and waiter. During this time he was also writing songs, and one of his first singles, Coco Joe, was later performed by the Righteous Brothers. In the late 1950s Bono began working at Specialty Records, a label that featured such performers as Little Richard and Sam Cooke. Bono served as a writer and producer before the label closed in 1960. Several years later he joined Gold Star Studios, and there he became the protégé of Phil Spector, a hugely influential record producer. Sonny and Cher. In 1963 Bono met a 16-year-old girl named Trillin Sarkisian who went by the name Cher. Bono was 27 at the time and separated from his first wife. The couple later divorced. Cher was smitten, telling Elle magazine in 2018 he was the most unusual person I'd ever seen. He had longish hair and he had the most beautiful suit on and beautiful long fingers and beetle boots, but they were Cuban heels. Cher eventually moved in with Bono and their relationship, platonic at first, later became romantic after an unofficial ceremony in 1964. The couple wed in 1969. The couple shared an interest in music and Sonny introduced Cher to Spector, who had her sing backup on several songs he produced, including Be My Baby 1963 by the Ronettes. Sonny and Cher also began recording music together, and in 1965 they had their first major hit, I Got You Babe, which was written by Sonny. The pop single sold more than 1 million copies and it made Sonny and Cher famous. He subsequently wrote a series of popular songs that included Bang Bang My Baby Shot Me Down 1966 and The Beat Goes On 1967. The former was released on Cher's second solo album, The Sunny Side of Cher. By the end of the 1960s, however, Sonny and Cher's popularity had waned. The duo struggled as music tastes changed and their foray into movies. They starred in the comedy Good Times. 1967, which was directed by William Friedkin, was a disappointment. Sonny and Cher began performing in nightclubs, and part of their act included witty banter. These performances eventually led to the TV variety show The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, which debuted in 1971. The couple's comedic exchanges proved popular with viewers, as did their colorful clothing. Cher often appeared in sequined outfits designed by Bob Mackie and Sonny wore bell-bottoms. The series was cancelled in 1974 when Sonny and Cher separated. Their divorce was finalized in 1975. However, they reunited on television, at least for the Sonny and Cher show, in 1976–77. Bono subsequently made a few sporadic TV and film appearances, but he was mostly done as an entertainer. In 1985 Bono opened an Italian restaurant in Palm Springs, California called Bono's. His efforts to hang a business sign were met with red tape, and the experience inspired him to enter politics. In 1988 Bono, who had not voted until he was 53, won the mayoral race in Palm Springs, and in 1992 he sought to make a giant political leap when he ran for the U.S. Senate. He lost in the Republican primary, however, and Democrat Dianne Feinstein ultimately won the seat. Bono subsequently set his sights on the U.S. House of Representatives. In the Republican Revolution, as the 1994 midterms became known, Bono was elected to represent the state's 44th congressional district as his party won enough seats to take control of the House. Bono brought star power to Washington, D.C., and he became one of the most popular Republican public speakers. He had a self-deprecating style, once observing, "I feel kind of like the black sheep in Congress, but here I am," and he noted that people often underestimated him. He quickly won over key Capitol Hill players with a humorous speech at a Washington Press Club Foundation dinner in 1995. Bono said that he did not deliver speeches from prepared remarks after trying it once and failing miserably. Bono's areas of interest on Capitol Hill included copyright law, immigration, and the environment. He was a conservative and opposed same-sex marriage, claiming, "I'm not homophobic, I'm not a bigot, I'm not pandering to hatred. I simply can't handle it. In 1996 he was elected to a second term. On January 5, 1998 during a skiing trip Bono crashed into a tree at the Heavenly Ski Resort on the California-Nevada line and died of massive head injuries. After divorcing Cher, Bono married Susie Coelho in 1981. They divorced in 1984 and then married Whitaker in 1986. Following his death, Mary Bono won her husband's House seat in a special election. Sonny Bono had 4 children including Chaz Bono, a transgender activist whose mother is Cher. Cher, by name of Cherilyn Sarkisian, born May 20, 1946, El Centro, California, U.S. American entertainer who parlayed her status as a teenage pop singer into a recording, concert and acting career. At age 16 Cher moved to Los Angeles, where she met entertainer and songwriter Salvatore Sonny Bono, whom she married in 1964. The couple began singing together and their first big pop hit came in 1965 with I Got You Babe, which sold more than 3 million copies. The duo went on to score a number of hits, but by the late 1960s their popularity had begun to fade. A jump start came in 1971 with the television variety show The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, which ran until 1974. During this time Cher's solo singing career flourished. Cher and Sonny divorced in 1974. Though they appeared as co-hosts of another television show in 1976–77. After Sonny left show business, Cher cultivated a successful nightclub act and revisited an earlier interest in acting. She appeared in the Broadway and film versions of Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, 1982, and received an Academy Award nomination for her supporting role in Silkwood, 1983. In 1988 she won an Academy Award for her starring role as an Italian-American widow in the romantic comedy Moonstruck, 1987. Her other films included Mask 1985, Suspect 1987 and Tea with Mussolini 1999. In 2010 she starred opposite Christina Aguilera as a nightclub owner and performer in the musical drama Burlesque, and in the following year she provided the voice of a lioness in the broad comedy Zookeeper. Cher later appeared in Mamma Mia! Here We Go Again 2018. After 2 successful albums, Cher 1987 and Heart of Stone 1989, Cher's music career waned, but she made a comeback with Believe 1998 and Living Proof 2002. In 2000 she won a Grammy Award for the dance single Believe. Cher's enduring popularity was evident with a successful and elaborate Las Vegas residency from 2008 to 2011. In 2017 she began another concert residency, in Las Vegas and Washington, D.C. Her later albums included Closer to the Truth 2013. In 2018 Cher was named a Kennedy Center honoree. Mayor, in modern usage, the head of a municipal government. As such, the mayor is almost invariably the chairman of the municipal council and of the council executive committee. In addition, the mayor may fulfill the roles of chief executive officer, ceremonial figurehead and local agent of the central government. In another more recent system of municipal management, the council manager system, the mayor has a much reduced role, serving essentially only as head of the council. Whatever the form of local government, the mayor's role may be said to rest largely on the relationship of the mayor to the council and to the central government. Mayors are either appointed or elected. In Europe until about the middle of the 19th century most mayors were appointed by the central government. With the rise of representative government, more and more countries adopted the practice of electing the mayor. This practice takes a variety of forms. In most European countries the mayor is elected by the local council from among its members and is usually the leader of the majority party or of one of the largest parties. In Switzerland, Canada, New Zealand, the Philippines and Japan most mayors are popularly elected. In countries where the mayor is an agent of the central government, as in France, the mayor is usually the actual as well as the nominal head of the local government. In other words, the position is generally determined by the central government and the mayor has much greater executive powers than the council. As an agent of the central government, the mayor is the mainspring of the municipal administration and the focal point of policy. With the development of popularly elected municipal councils, most mayors have taken on a dual role, serving not only as chief executive officer of the municipal administration but also as agents of the central government, charged with such functions as maintaining public order, security and health. In the United States the central government never did control the cities directly, and mayors were either elected by the populace at large or chosen by a city council whose members were also so elected. Among the reform measures of the early 20th century was the so-called council-manager system, in which the mayor, whether chosen by the council or by the electorate at large, merely presided over the council, while most executive powers were exercised by a city manager hired by the council. Singing, the production of musical tones by means of the human voice. In its physical aspect, singing has a well-defined technique that depends on the use of the lungs, which act as an air supply, or bellows on the larynx, which acts as a reed or vibrator on the chest and head cavities, which have the function of an amplifier as the tube in a wind instrument, and on the tongue, which together with the palate, teeth and lips articulate and impose consonants and vowels on the amplified sound. Though these four mechanisms function independently, they are nevertheless coordinated in the establishment of a vocal technique and are made to interact upon one another. Singing is distinguished from speaking by the manner in which the breath is expended to vibrate the vocal cords. Singing requires more breath the louder, higher and longer one sings. It also requires that the emission of breath be more firmly controlled. A pertinent analogy is the function of the instrumentalist's breath in playing a reed instrument, e.g. a clarinet, an oboe or a saxophone. The technique of singing depends ultimately on the coordination of the various anatomical mechanisms in order to produce a propulsion of sound in a steady flow. A further distinction between singing and speaking is the control that is required, in singing, of the movement and reflexes of the larynx. As one sings higher, the larynx tends to rise sympathetically and at a certain point becomes an interference, causing the voice to break or crack. Not much movement of the larynx occurs within a singer's normal range, which is usually about an octave and a third. Beyond that range, either above or below, an element of technical accomplishment sets the professional off from the unschooled amateur. Western singing is distinguished above all by its volume. Singers of other cultures may have a wider range, particularly a greater upward extension, but it is doubtful that they have sung louder. Western singing is also distinguished by its concern with pure sound, with the tone quality or timbre, and with color, with what is felt to be the sheer beauty of the voice itself. Both singers and their listeners, in Western music more than any other, have tended to lose sight of song's roots and language and to think of singing as a purely instrumental production. Modern Western styles of singing largely derive from the Italian bel canto, which had its origin in a style associated with the polyphonic music of the 16th century. Because this music expressed the significance or the moods of the text, a great range of expression was required from the singers, who in these polyphonic works assumed something of the function of a vocal orchestra. The art of singing accordingly evolved to allow the singers the maximum power and variety of expression. See also bel canto. Bel canto singing from the 17th through the early 19th century was built primarily on the recognition that the intensity of vocal tone on a single note may be increased or diminished. The varying of this intensity was known as the messa di voce. There is, however, a difference between variation in intensity and variation in volume of vocal tone. The style depended on the technique of intensity, that is, tone was varied by increasing or decreasing the air pressure on the glottal lips and not by enlarging the oral chamber, which merely resulted in a larger tonal volume. The style was also based on the principle that the voice has two tones: a diapason tone produced when the larynx is in a relatively low position and a flute tone when the larynx assumes a higher position. These distinctions, however, were largely obliterated when a broader style of singing was introduced by Richard Wagner and later composers. Physical aspects of the technique of bel canto singing demanded a stance in which the chest was raised and the stomach drawn in, the raising of the soft palate together with a corresponding lowering of the larynx and the drawing back of the chin with the effect of opening the throat. Correct breathing was above all essential, and the Italians went so far as to declare that he who knows how to breathe can sing. By a contraction of the upper abdominal muscles, control is achieved over the diaphragm, which thus enables the flow of air pressure from the lungs to be kept steady. This principle, which was the basis of singing in the 18th century, was later adopted by the Spanish tenor Manuel Garcia, who declared that the lungs are for tone emission, the glottis is for pitch, the oral cavity is for vowel and timbre, and the front of the mouth is for consonants. The function of the diaphragm is to regulate the pressure of air, while the larynx, as a nozzle in a water spray, determines the nature of the flow. With the muscles in appropriate position and the reserve of air under proper control, accented notes in singing are given their full value not as startling percussive notes but in the manner of an accented note produced by a violinist who prepares his effect by the proper placing of his bow. An exercise known as vibration enables the singer to control the voice at the larynx and by attacking a note softly to increase the volume by pressure of the larynx. Later schools of singing paid much attention to the resonation of the voice in the mask, that is the cavities of the head, though this resonation did not affect the radiative power of the voice but only its volume. These singers, and also the still later parlando singers who effected a union of speech in singing, made a conscious use of resonation in this way and differed from the bel canto singers in that they exercised less control over physical mechanisms. The development of the orchestra by Hector Berlioz, Giuseppe Verdi and Wagner in the 19th century encouraged singers to seek means of amplifying their voices by methods of resonation unknown in the bel canto style, and a new method was established of singing on resonance. Jean de Riesk, who emphasized the function of the nose in resonation, was the main exponent of this school. Apart from the facial mask and the nose, other resonators were held to be the hard palate and the teeth. Demands made on the voice by the Romantic operatic composers transformed the principles of the style, largely because the human voice would have been submerged by the vast orchestral resources drawn upon by these composers. Especially in the later music dramas of Wagner, sheer weight of orchestral sound forced the singer to unprecedented vocal exertions. With Verdi it was the vehemence of dramatic utterance rather than the presumptions of the orchestra that called for louder and more emphatic singing than would have been thought seemly in the age of bel canto. Singers found it difficult if not impossible to be at once forceful and elegant. A strong reaction thus set in, especially in Germany, against vocal improvisation and embellishment of any kind. What had seemed the ultimate in singing from the 17th to well into the 19th century was now anathematized as presumptuous frippery. Florid song lived on into the 20th century in the surviving operas of the older repertoire, but it tended to become stereotyped and the property of specialists. Whereas until about 1830 all singers were expected to be masters of the devices of bel canto, they were now categorized as dramatic lyric coloratura specialists in florid song, and so on. The traditional range classifications of soprano, alto, tenor and bass were also widened to admit the mezzo-soprano, the baritone and the bass baritone. The second half of the 20th century produced a predictable reaction in favor of the singer with the revival of public enthusiasm for nearly forgotten operas by Gioacchino Rossini, Gaetano Donizetti and Vincenzo Bellini, and even of the true bel canto operas of George Friedrich Handel, and the emergence of singers capable of acquiring the requisite technique imposed by music that left much to the singer's invention and discretion. The popular singer too, relieved by the microphone of the necessity of raising his voice and exploiting the improvisatory conventions of jazz, employed intuitively many ornaments and expressive devices nearly identical to those of bel canto. The vocal requirements of avant-garde music extended beyond those of traditional operatic singing to include wider flexibility of timbre techniques such as Sprechstimme, musically pitched speech, and improvisational fantasy drawing on sounds formerly excluded from the trained singer's vocal resources. Palm Springs City, Riverside County, Southern California, U.S. It lies in the Coachella Valley at the foot of Mount San Jacinto, which rises to 10,804 feet 3,293 meters. The area originally was inhabited by Cahuilla Indians. It was known to the Spanish as Agua Caliente, hot water, for its hot springs. By 1872 it had become a stage stop between Prescott, Arizona and Los Angeles. In 1884 Judge John Guthrie McCallum established the Palm Valley Colony on the site, which later developed as a model desert resort. The city includes within its boundaries parts of the Agua Caliente Indian Reservation. Palm Springs became a glamorous desert resort and residence frequented by Hollywood film stars and other celebrities, and it is a favorite vacation site for college students in the Los Angeles area. It features luxurious hotels, fashionable restaurants and boutiques, and vast recreation areas for tennis, swimming, hiking, skiing, and especially golf. More than 50 golf courses lie within a 20-mile 30-kilometer radius. The 2.5-mile 4 kilometers Palm Springs aerial tram, upon which passengers ascend 5,873 feet 1,791 meters to Mount San Jacinto, has the world's largest rotating tram cars. Other local attractions include Knott's Soak City, USA Water Park, Morton Botanical Garden with several thousand species of desert plants, and the Palm Springs Air Museum, which features vintage World War II combat aircraft. San Bernardino National Forest and Joshua Tree National Park are nearby. Incorporated 1938. Pop music hall and variety popular entertainment that features successive acts starring singers, comedians, dancers and actors, and sometimes jugglers, acrobats and magicians. Derived from the taproom concerts given in city taverns in England during the 18th and 19th centuries, music hall entertainment was eventually confined to a stage with the audience seated at tables. Liquor sales paid the expenses. To discourage these entertainments, a licensing act was passed in 1751. The measure, however, had the contrary effect. The smaller taverns avoided obtaining licenses by forming music clubs, and the larger taverns, reacting to the added dignity of being licensed, expanded by employing musicians and installing scenery. These eventually moved from their tavern premises into large plush and gilt palaces where elaborate scenic effects were possible. Saloon became the name for any place of popular entertainment. Variety was an evening of mixed plays, and music hall meant a concert hall that featured a mixture of musical and comic entertainment. During the 19th century, the demand for entertainment was intensified by the rapid growth of urban population. By the Theatre Regulations Act of 1843, drinking and smoking, although prohibited in legitimate theatres, were permitted in the music halls. Tavern owners therefore often annexed buildings adjoining their premises as music halls. The low comedy of the halls designed to appeal to the working class and to men of the middle class. Caricatured events familiar to the patrons, e.g. weddings, funerals, seaside holidays, large families and wash day. The originator of the English music hall as such was Charles Morton, who built Morton's Canterbury Hall 1852 in London. He developed a strong musical program, presenting classics as well as popular music. Some outstanding performers were Albert Chevalier, Gracie Fields, Lily Langtry, Harry Lauder, Dan Leno, and Vesta Tilley. The usual show consisted of 6 to 8 acts, possibly including a comedy skit, a juggling act, a magic act, a mime acrobats, a dancing act, a singing act, and perhaps a one-act play. In the early 20th century, music halls were dwarfed by large-scale variety palaces. London theatres, such as the Hippodrome, displayed aquatic dramas, and the Colosseum presented reenactments of the Derby and chariot races of ancient Rome. These were short-lived, but other ambitious plans kept variety prosperous after the real music hall had been killed by the competition of the cinema. Celebrities such as Sarah Bernhardt, Sir George Alexander, and Sir Herbert Beerbohm put on one-act plays or the last acts of plays. Musicians such as Pietro Mascagni and Sir Henry Wood gave performances with their orchestras. Popular singers of the 1920s such as Nora Bayes and Sophie Tucker elicited great enthusiasm. Diaghilev's ballet, at the height of its fame, appeared in 1918 at the Colosseum on a program that included comedians and jugglers. The advent of the talking motion picture in the late 1920s caused variety theatres throughout Great Britain to be converted into cinemas. To keep comedians employed, a mixture of films and songs called Sign Variety was introduced, and there were attempts to keep theatres open from noon to midnight with non-stop variety. The Windmill Theatre near Piccadilly Circus, London, was notable among the few survivors that remained after World War II from what had been hundreds of music halls. The American equivalent of the British music hall is vaudeville. See also vaudeville. Josephine Baker, original name Frida Josephine McDonald, born June 3, 1906, St. Louis, Missouri, U.S. Died April 12, 1975, Paris, France. American-born French dancer and singer who symbolized the beauty and vitality of Black American culture, which took Paris by storm in the 1920s. Baker grew up fatherless and in poverty. Between the ages of 8 and 10 she was out of school, helping to support her family. As a child, Baker developed a taste for the flamboyant that was later to make her famous. As an adolescent she became a dancer, touring at 16 with a dance troupe from Philadelphia. In 1923 she joined the chorus in a road company performing the musical comedy Shuffle Along, and then moved to New York City, where she advanced steadily through the show Chocolate Dandies on Broadway and the floor show of the Plantation Club. In 1925 she went to Paris to dance at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in La Revue Nègre and introduced her dance Sauvage to France. She went on to become one of the most popular music hall entertainers in France and achieved star billing at the Folies-Bergère, where she created a sensation by dancing semi-nude in a G-string ornamented with bananas. She became a French citizen in 1937. She sang professionally for the first time in 1930, made her screen debut as a singer 4 years later in Zuzu, and made several more films before World War II curtailed her career. During the German occupation of France, Baker worked with the Red Cross and the Resistance, and as a member of the Free French Forces she entertained troops in Africa and the Middle East. She was later awarded the Croix de Guerre and the Legion of Honor with the Rosette of the Resistance. After the war, much of her energy was devoted to Les Milandes, her estate in southwestern France, from which she began in 1950 to adopt babies of all nationalities in the cause of what she defined as an experiment in brotherhood and her rainbow tribe. She adopted a total of 12 children. She retired from the stage in 1956, but to maintain Les Milandes she was later obliged to return, starring in Paris in 1959. She traveled several times to the United States to participate in civil rights demonstrations. In 1968 her estate was sold to satisfy accumulated debt. She continued to perform occasionally until her death in 1975, during the celebration of the 50th anniversary of her Paris debut. Her life was dramatized in the television movie The Josephine Baker Story 1991 and was showcased in the documentary Josephine Baker. Premiere Icon Noir 2018. Josephine Baker. The Story of an Awakening. Ada Campbell was introduced to the theatrical world in 1875, after her father's death had left the family in poverty. Her mother got her and her elder sister Georgia an engagement in Rochester, New York. Variety Theater. In December 1875 they made their first professional appearance at the Adelphi Theater in Buffalo, where they were billed as the Irwin Sisters. A Midwestern tour under their stage names, May and Flo Irwin, was followed by a New York City debut in January 1877. In October of that year they began a run at Tony Pastor's New York Music Hall. After 6 years of vaudeville and burlesque with Pastor's company, May Irwin left in 1883 to join Augustin Daly's stock company, then featuring Ada Reardon and John Drew, and made her first appearances on the theatrical stage in December in Arthur Wing Pinero's Girls and Boys. For Daly she appeared in The Magistrate and Night Off the Recruiting Officer and other pieces, and made her London debut in August 1884 in Dollars and Cents. By 1887 Irwin had decided that she preferred the free and easy world of vaudeville to repertory work, and in that year she signed with the Howard Athenaeum of Boston. She toured with that troupe for 2 years, and in 1889-90 she toured in the popular City Directory. She returned to the legitimate stage in 1893 in Charles Frohman's His Wedding Day. In the afterpiece, The Poet and the Puppets, a burlesque on Lady Windermere's Fan, she was a hit singing After the Ball. Later in the year she appeared in A Country Sport, the first of a series of full-length farces in which she had her greatest success. The Widow Jones 1895 provided a brief scene for Thomas A. Edison's Vitascope cinema projector, in which Irwin and her leading man, John Rice, shared a prolonged kiss. The Kiss 1896. One of the earliest commercially distributed films, was denounced from pulpits across the country. In Courted into Court 1896 she sang Mr. Johnson Turned Me Loose and introduced A Hot Time in the Old Town. In 1897 Irwin began appearing under her own management. Her good humor, wit and buxom figure made her one of the most popular performers over the next 20 years. She was briefly master of ceremonies for a small revue, the 49ers, in 1922, and then retired to her farm in Clayton, New York. Red Skelton, by name of Richard Bernard Skelton, born July 18, 1913, Vincennes, Indiana, U.S. died September 17, 1997, Rancho Mirage, California, American pantomimist and radio and television comedian. Host and star performer of the popular TV variety program The Red Skelton Show, 1951-71, called The Red Skelton Hour from 1962 to 1970. In that series Skelton recreated a number of characters, among them Clem Coddletopper, Sheriff Deadeye Jr., the Mean Widow Kid, and Cauliflower McPug he had developed during his years in vaudeville and radio. Skelton's style deftly combined broad humor with emotional complexity. Skelton's father, a circus clown, died 2 months before Skelton was born, and he had to help support himself from an early age. He was a newsboy by age 7, and at 10 he took to the road with a medicine show touring the Midwest, effectively ending his classroom schooling. He went on to perform in minstrel shows, burlesque shows, circuses, and radio. His radio appearance on The Rudy Valley Show in 1937 led to other bookings, and he was voted the Outstanding New Radio Star of 1941. He also took roles in some 30 movies including a film starring Ginger Rogers, Having a Wonderful Time 1938. His other movie credits included Bathing Beauty, 1944, The Fuller Brush Man, 1948, and Excuse My Dust 1951. He moved from movies and radio to television when NBC inaugurated the Red Skelton Show in 1951. The show was cancelled in 1953 but it was quickly picked up by CBS where it remained until 1970. The final season was broadcast again by NBC. Skelton was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame in 1988. Folies-Bergère Parisian Music Hall and Variete Entertainment Theatre that is one of the major tourist attractions of France. Following its opening in a new theatre on May 1, 1869, the Folies became one of the first major music halls in Paris. During its early years it presented a mixed program of operetta and pantomime, with the renowned mime Pierre Legrand performing the latter. In 1887 the Folies' highly popular revue entitled Place aux Jeunes established it as the premier night spot in Paris. By the last decade of the 19th century the theatre's repertory encompassed musical comedies and revues, operettas, vaudeville sketches, playlets, ballets, eccentric dancers, acrobats, jugglers, tightrope walkers and magicians. When the vogue of nudity seized the music halls of Paris in 1894, the Folies elaborated it to such an extent that the theatre's reputation for sensational displays of female nudity came to overshadow its other performances. George Spelvine, U.S. theatrical convention used in the credits commonly to conceal dual roles or for a corpse or other anthropomorphic props. Spelvine first appeared on Broadway in the cast list of Charles A. Gardner's Carl the Peddler in 1886. Will Smith employed the character in many of his plays, beginning with Brewster's Millions in 1906. He appeared with Maude Adams in Joan of Arc 1908 as a betting man in high-button shoes, 1947. And as Colonel Dent in Jane Eyre 1958. D. W. Griffith cast Spelvine as a Union soldier in his epochal film The Birth of a Nation, 1915, and as a dancer in Way Down East 1920. He also had a small role in the Academy Award-winning From Here to Eternity 1953. Spelvine was first listed in television credits in the dramatic series The Fugitive, and from time to time he has filled out the cast of such daytime soap operas as The Guiding Light and Edge of Night. When a female character is needed the player is listed as Georgiana, or Georgette, Spelvine. Spelvine's British counterparts are Walter Plinge, Mr. F. Annie and Mr. Bart. Don McNeill, born December 23, 1907, Galena, Ill, U.S. Died May 7, 1996, Evanston, Ill, U.S. radio entertainer. He entered radio in the 1920s as part of a singing team. In 1933 he took over as host of an NBC morning program in Chicago and created The Breakfast Club. Usually unscripted, it relied on listeners' comments, poems, and folksy humor. It was the longest-running show in radio network history when it ended in 1968. Sir Harry Lauder, in full Sir Harry MacLennan Lauder, born August 4, 1870, Portobello, Edinburgh, died February 26, 1950, near Strathaven in Lanarkshire, Scott. Scottish music hall comedian who excited enthusiasm throughout the English-speaking world as singer and composer of some play-hearted Scottish songs. While a child half-timer in a flax mill he won singing competitions but worked in a coal mine for 10 years before joining a concert party that took him to Belfast, Birkenhead and other places that claim to have seen his professional debut. The first songs that he wrote and sang were Irish or English, but when he came to London to Gatti's Music Hall in May 1900, he was wearing the kilt. Later he wore trousers for his character studies only, such as Saftest of the Family and It's Nice to Get Up in the Morning. During his week's engagement at Gatti's a gap occurred in the program at the Tivoli, and Lauder stepped into it with Lassie Killy Cranky an immediate success. Until then his songs had all been comic. With I Love a Lassie he struck the homely poetic note that gave charm to When I Get Back Again to Bonnie Scotland and Roman in the Gloamin'. His range extended from the bibulous a Weedy Ock and Doris to the hortatory end of the road. With a large repertory of his own songs, some verses partly by other persons, he toured America, South Africa, and Australia, and during World War I he sang to troops in France. He gave many concerts for war charities and was knighted in 1919. He wrote 4 books of reminiscences and acted in several films. He made 22 American tours and entertained troops again in World War II. Sonny Bono, in full Salvatore Philip Bono, born February 16, 1935, Detroit, Michigan, U.S. died January 5, 1998, South Lake Tahoe, California. American songwriter, producer, entertainer and politician who found fame in the 1960s and 70s as part of the TV and music duo Sonny and Cher. He later became a Republican politician and served in the U.S. House of Representatives, 1995–98. Bono was born in Detroit to immigrants from Sicily. The family struggled financially, and when he was 7 years old they moved to Los Angeles. He later dropped out of high school and worked odd jobs, including those of truck driver, construction worker, and waiter. During this time he was also writing songs, and one of his first singles, Coco Joe, was later performed by the Righteous Brothers. In the late 1950s Bono began working at Specialty Records, a label that featured such performers as Little Richard and Sam Cooke. Bono served as a writer and producer before the label closed in 1960. Several years later he joined Gold Star Studios, and there he became the protege of Phil Spector, a hugely influential record producer. Sonny and Cher. In 1963 Bono met a 16-year-old girl named Trillin Sarkisian, who went by the name Cher. Bono was 27 at the time and separated from his first wife. The couple later divorced. Cher was smitten, telling Elle magazine in 2018, "He was the most unusual person I'd ever seen. He had longish hair and he had the most beautiful suit on, and beautiful long fingers and beetle boots, but they were Cuban heels." Cher eventually moved in with Bono, and their relationship, platonic at first, later became romantic. After an unofficial ceremony in 1964, the couple wed in 1969. The couple shared an interest in music, and Sonny introduced Cher to Spector, who had her sing backup on several songs he produced, including Be My Baby, 1963, by the Ronettes. Sonny and Cher also began recording music together, and in 1965 they had their first major hit, I Got You Babe, which was written by Sonny. The pop single sold more than 1 million copies, and it made Sonny and Cher famous. He subsequently wrote a series of popular songs that included Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down, 1966, and The Beat Goes On, 1967. The former was released on Cher's second solo album, The Sunny Side of Cher. By the end of the 1960s, however, Sonny and Cher's popularity had waned. The duo struggled as music tastes changed, and their foray into movies. They starred in the comedy Good Times 1967, which was directed by William Friedkin, was a disappointment. Sonny and Cher began performing in nightclubs, and part of their act included witty banter. These performances eventually led to the TV variety show The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, which debuted in 1971. The couple's comedic exchanges proved popular with viewers, as did their colorful clothing. Cher often appeared in sequined outfits designed by Bob Mackie, and Sonny wore bell-bottoms. The series was cancelled in 1974, when Sonny and Cher separated. Their divorce was finalized in 1975. However, they reunited, on television at least for the Sonny and Cher show in 1976–77. Bono subsequently made a few sporadic TV and film appearances, but he was mostly done as an entertainer. In 1985 Bono opened an Italian restaurant in Palm Springs, California, called Bono's. His efforts to hang a business sign were met with red tape, and the experience inspired him to enter politics. In 1988 Bono, who had not voted until he was 53, won the mayoral race in Palm Springs, and in 1992 he sought to make a giant political leap when he ran for the U.S. Senate. He lost in the Republican primary, however, and Democrat Dianne Feinstein ultimately won the seat. Bono subsequently set his sights on the U.S. House of Representatives. In the Republican Revolution, as the 1994 midterms became known, Bono was elected to represent the state's 44th congressional district as his party won enough seats to take control of the House. Bono brought star power to Washington, D.C., and he became one of the most popular Republican public speakers. He had a self-deprecating style, once observing, "I feel kind of like the black sheep in Congress, but here I am," and he noted that people often underestimated him. He quickly won over key Capitol Hill players with a humorous speech at a Washington Press Club Foundation dinner in 1995. Bono said that he did not deliver speeches from prepared remarks after trying it once and failing miserably. Bono's areas of interest on Capitol Hill included copyright law, immigration, and the environment. He was a conservative and opposed same-sex marriage, claiming, "I'm not homophobic, I'm not a bigot, I'm not pandering to hatred. I simply can't handle." In 1996 he was elected to a second term. On January 5, 1998, during a skiing trip, Bono crashed into a tree at the Heavenly Ski Resort on the California-Nevada line and died of massive head injuries. Personal life. After divorcing Cher, Bono married Susie Coelho in 1981. They divorced in 1984 and then married Whitaker in 1986. Following his death, Mary Bono won her husband's House seat in a special election. Sonny Bono had 4 children including Chaz Bono, a transgender activist whose mother is Cher. The cabaret probably originated in France in the 1880s as a small club in which the audience was grouped around a platform. The entertainment at first consisted of a series of amateur acts linked together by a master of ceremonies. Its coarse humor was usually directed against the conventions of bourgeois society. The typical program, which first flourished in the Montmartre district of Paris at the tiny Chat Noir in 1881, listed poetry readings, shadow play songs and comic skits. The primary exponent of French cabaret entertainment was the Moulin Rouge in Paris, established in 1889 as a dance hall. It featured a cabaret show in which the can-can was first performed and in which many major stars of variety and music hall later appeared. The world of the Moulin Rouge in its heyday was immortalized in the graphic art of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. Imported from France about 1900, the first German cabaret was established in Berlin by Baron Ernst von Wolzogen. It retained the intimate atmosphere, entertainment platform, and improvisational character of the French cabaret but developed its own characteristic gallows humor. By the late 1920s the German cabaret gradually had come to feature mildly risqué musical entertainment for the middle-class man as well as biting political and social satire. It was also a center for underground political and literary movements. Patronized by artists, writers, political revolutionaries and intellectuals, the German cabarets were usually located in old cellars. They were the centers of leftist opposition to the rise of the German Nazi Party and often experienced Nazi retaliation for their criticism of the government. The composers Paul Hindemith and Eric Satie, unknown at the time, were active in the cabarets, so also were the playwrights Bertolt Brecht and Frank Wedekind. The musical show Cabaret 1966 and a film version 1972 portrayed the 1930s German cabaret as inspired by Anglo-American writer Christopher Isherwood's Berlin Stories. The cabaret survived in post-World War II Germany as a forum for topical satire, but it lost most of its political significance. Comparable cabarets thrived in Barcelona, Krakow, Moscow, and St. Petersburg during the 20th century. Tristan Tzara's Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich 1916-17 was the breeding ground of Dada, a platform for radical experimentation in poetry, fine art and music. The English cabaret had its roots in the taproom concerts given in city taverns during the 18th and 19th centuries. A popular form by the end of the 19th century, it was often called a music hall, although music hall usually meant variety entertainment in England. In the United States, where it was usually called a nightclub, the cabaret during the second half of the 20th century was one of the few remaining places where an entertainer, usually a comedian, singer or musician, could establish rapport with an audience in an intimate atmosphere that encouraged improvisation and freedom of material. Although music for dancing was often provided during the entertainer's intermissions, the primary attraction was the featured entertainer. In the post-World War II period, a few performers were successful with sharp political and social satire, but commercial considerations were paramount and nightclubs relied chiefly on established theatrical personalities who could attract a wide audience. By 1980 many nightclubs had disappeared, giving way to theater, restaurants and entertainment centers with larger seating capacity. This style of entertainment is carried on in comedy clubs, preeminent among which is Chicago's Second City, and in a musical torch song lounge tradition that revives jazz and musical theater repertoires and programs performed by solo vocalists. The material at comedy clubs may be political, while the performances at singing clubs generally eschew such controversy.